Yes guys, welcome back and thanks for tuning in. Today I'll be a bit of a follow on from my previous video with the tri-stick. I'll be using the notches that I used in the tri-stick to make a couple of traps. So if you watched that previous video, this is kind of a follow on from that. So here's the actual tri-stick on the right hand side, and I'll be using a couple of those notches to make the traps. Right now I'm just cutting different lengths of wood, different pieces of wood to different lengths. I usually cut them a little bit long because you can shorten them as you need to. It's better to have it a little bit longer than a little bit too short, if you know what I mean. But yeah, as I do the notches, I'll explain to you which notch I'm doing, and yeah, we'll go from there. So the first length of wood that I'm going to be shaping will be the bait stick. As you can see, I'm just basically taking a bit of the bark off at the end, and the first notch on this one will actually be a V notch. But before I do the notch, what I need to do is see what the natural resting spot of the stick is. By finding the natural resting spot on the stick, you're basically enabling the stick to sit in its natural position. This actually makes setting the trap much easier. When adding this V notch, it needs to be directly above, facing upwards from the stick's natural resting spot. And there it is, that's the very first notch done. This V notch will actually seat the support stick. The next notch will be the L7 or the 7 notch. What you basically do is you turn it 1/4 turn from the V notch, and then you put your L7 in, or your 7 notch, however you want to say it. And the final piece of the bait stick will be a little bit of a split in the end. Instead of sharpening it to a point, I prefer to put a little bit of a slit in the end so I can wedge my bait in there, which makes it harder for the prey to take it off the stick, which in turn would mean the trap gets set off easier and obviously it's more successful. This is only for demonstration purposes, by the way. These kinds of traps are just specifically for a survival situation, or maybe it might be legal in your country, I'm not sure, but over here in the UK you definitely can't use any of this stuff. This is just for educational purposes only. So there's the split in the top of the stick, and then I'll just show you the cuts one more time. You know, just move it up a little bit there. So there's your 7 notch, there's your V. On to the next bit. So here I'm just holding the 3 sticks that make up the Figure-4 all together as though it was already made, just to see where the next notches need to go. It's just good practice, you know, rather than just winging it. Kind of, if I line it all up, then I know exactly where things need to be. So this is a support shaft that I'm actually working on at the moment, and this is going to be another 7 notch. Then the bait stick and the support will all both fit together as one. And once again, here's a 7 notch on the tri-stick. When you're actually doing these notches for a trap, remember that the trap has to have a smooth action to it. You know, if there's any kind of notches or any kind of imperfections in it, then there's a chance that the trap might not trigger. So remember, when you're doing the notches, always try and keep them as smooth as possible. In fact, if you're making anything, if you're crafting anything in the field, you know, it's better to sit there and just try and make it the best you can possibly make it. Again, the 7 notch. Just checking the fit, all seems good. Now I need to put a wedge on the top so that the support stick can sit on the top of it. So the wedge that you'd use to make a digging stick, that's on the top now. That's the shaft done. Now the final stick is obviously the top piece, which will be the support stick. So the first notch on this stick will be the wedge at the base of the stick, which will sit in the V notch on the bait stick. And while I'm at it, I'll just clean up any little stumps that are sticking out from branches, just to make it smoother. And just to make sure that I'm not too lonely, the rain decides to join me. Again, just bringing the sticks together, just as a quick measure, just to see where I need to put the next V notch. I've also noticed that the end of the stick's a little bit too long, so yeah, I'm going to cut it about there. I'm just shaving the top down flat so it's on an angle, so that when I press it underneath the rock or the log, it'll be nice and flat and flush and in line with the actual angle of the rock. To make this is similar to how you'd make a wedge, only you just shave one side of it down instead of turning it over and doing both sides. Quick measure again, just to figure out where the V was supposed to go. If in doubt, measure twice, cut once, yeah? Again, remember, everything on the trap has to be smooth, yeah, in order for a successful trigger. Now that I'm happy with the way everything looks, let's put it together and see if it actually triggers, or see if everything's in line, more to the point. So that's the first trap made, so let's just have a look at the notches. You've got the wedge on the top, then you've got the 7 notch or the L notch, depending on where you live. On the left hand side, just as a reference there's the actual tri-stick that I made, the second one. On the next stick, we've got, again, 7 notch. Again, has to be smooth. This is the actual bait stick. And then quarter of a turn, you've got the V notch. And let's throw it all together, see if it's stable. I'm holding it there, yep, seems stable enough. Very light trigger, awesome. And next, the bird spring snare. I will be actually setting these traps up at the end of the video as a demonstration, just to show you that they do actually work. But for now, let's crack on with the next one. So I've got basically a Y stick there, which came from a piece of dead wood. I'm shaving down the ends to a point so I can dig it in the ground. And on the top, I'm just rounding it off to make a crown, again, as seen on the top of the tri-stick. Next, I need to make a little toggle to go through the Y stick. Just getting a smooth surface on both sides, making it a little bit thinner. This will just make it easier to, to put a hole through, and it'll also sit up against the Y stick a little bit better. You might remember on the tri-stick that I actually put a square hole in that. I just need to create any kind of hole in this one. It's just to pass the thin paracord through so that I can tie it properly. Again, remembering if something's worth doing, it's worth doing right. Especially if you was unlucky enough to be in a survival situation. This trap could be your main source of food, maybe your only way of catching food. Let's see if the hole's big enough to get the paracord through in one go. Just opening the noose out a little bit to try and give me a rough guide of where the toggle has to be. I'm not going to tie like a proper knot in this because I want to use the cordage again. But yeah, there's a simple way of fixing this. I'll show you that now. I'm sure there's lots of different ways to tie this, but this is my way. Simple, takes no time at all, and is very secure. Right, I'll show you how to do that now. Very simple. So you push your cordage through the toggle, and then the side where your snare is, you basically do a twist, as I've done there. Twist, slip it over the top, and then cinch it up. Make sure it's level with the hole. Mine just came off there a little bit, but put it back on. Give it a quick tug. Try and line up both the pieces of cordage so it's either side of the hole, and job's a good one. have the noose and the toggle, nice big noose as you can see, and obviously the rest of the cordage on the other side to tie to a spring pole. Next it'll be the bait stick, and this will lie between the toggle and a stopper stick at the end, but you'll see that once it's set up. I haven't made that bit yet. You don't actually have to use it for bait itself. This could just be a trigger, you know, it could just be the trigger mechanism itself. You don't have to put bait on it. You can basically just put the bait on the inside of the noose, and then if the bird sits on top of the trigger stick, it'll still trigger the trap. So that's 3 pieces of the trap made. You've got the Y stick that digs into the ground, you've got the trigger stick, and also you've got the noose and the toggle. Just a stopper stick next. I was just deciding if I actually needed to shave this one down. I'm actually using a piece of holly and the bark's a little bit on the soft side, and it's better to just shave it down and give myself a clean piece of wood to work off. After all, if the bark's a bit too soft, the trigger might dig into it, and that might prevent the trap from being set off. Just a quick check again, nice and smooth. So now all the pieces of the trap are made. I've got myself a bit of a spring pole there, so let's figure out where everything needs to go. So to figure out where I need to dig the Y stick in the ground, I basically wrap the cordage round, and where it's hanging straight down to the floor, directly underneath the stick, that's where I need to be putting the Y in the ground. That way it shouldn't put too much tension on the Y, if that makes sense. You know, the last thing you need if you're in a survival situation is the Y coming out of the ground and the trap triggering itself, you know. Because obviously I'm going to be using the cordage again, you know, once I've finished with the trap, all I'm basically doing is putting a clove hitch on the top. You know, it doesn't have to be a seriously secure knot. It's not going to be a full-on working trap. It's just for demonstration purposes. So now I've found the spot where the cordage comes straight down, and that's where I'm going to be putting the upside down Y stick. Now I'm just meeting the toggle up with the bait stick, and I can judge where I need my stop stick to be placed. So I'm just holding it there, checking where I need the stop stick, and then just pressing the stop stick into the ground. It's kind of soft ground this, so I didn't need to hammer it in. Now that everything's in place, it's time to set the trap. What I'll basically do is set it up, and then I'll grab the camera and give you a walk round in a second. As you can see, I'm placing the long part of the toggle underneath the Y that's dug in the ground. I press the bait stick against the toggle, and then I press the other side of the bait stick against the stop it stick on the opposite side, which I'll show you in a second. That's now set. Just drape the noose over the top. Very important to remember, yeah, the noose doesn't go underneath the Y stick, it goes round the side. Always remember that. Now you can just leave the noose on the floor as it is, it'll still work, but I like to prop the noose up with Y sticks, yeah, to keep the noose off the ground. This is even more of a benefit if you're in like long grass, that type of stuff. Let's say you're trying to catch grouse or pheasant or that type, ground birds. To keep it up off the ground gives you a better chance of catching the bird. This kind of trap won't actually kill the bird outright. What it'll basically do is capture the bird, which basically means you've got to dispatch it later. So there's the stop stick at the end. There's the noose propped up with the Y sticks. There's the toggle, and there's the spring pole. So let's try and set it off. Pretty quick, eh? Now let's set up the Figure-4 trap. Just opening up the splits on the end of the bait stick like I've shown you. You know, I put a split in there for a reason. And I just found some blackberries in the area to use as bait for the demonstration. And there it is, sat inside the V. There's no way that an animal's pulling it out. Now it's time to set the trap. These can be a little bit tricky to set up, and you know, you need to watch your fingers with these kinds of traps. If you've got a heavy weight, there's always a chance that it can drop down onto your fingers, so just be careful. It's the same with a couple of the other traps, like the Siberian split stick or the Paracord Deadfall. You know, any kind of Deadfall trap, you know, you need to be careful of your fingers. You also need to be pretty mindful about what size rock and what weight rock you're using for game. Obviously, if you're just catching little field mice, this it's a bit overkill. You know, it's just going to end up flat. You're going to end up splitting the intestines, and that can contaminate the meat, which in turn can contaminate you if there's anything wrong with it. No, I'm grabbing hold of the top of the rock before I let go. You know, I like my fingers. This is a quick look of how it looks once it's set. I know that the support stick's a little bit off, but it's okay because it's still set. And it just makes the trigger that little bit more sensitive anyway. Let's see if it works. If you made it this far, don't forget to like, subscribe and all that jazz. Drop me a comment, you know, do you have any variations of these traps? Have you used these traps? You know, and check out some of my other content if if this is the kind of thing that you're into. And I'll see you on the next one.